Welcome to our presentation on, my name is Ross Hebert. I'm from Canada Post. That's Canada's National Post Office. And I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about GuiXT and some of the, successes that we've had with the product. The first thing to let you know is that if you look at the spelling of my name in your agenda, please scratch off the first R. It's the nemesis that I've had since as a boy. People want to put Hebert, and it's actually Hebert. The other thing is, I want to just do a quick little audience survey. First of all, anyone here from Canada Post, Innova Post, or Purolator? Good. Anybody here from Canada? Oh, darn it. Okay. Okay, well, what that really means is I guess I can only go so far with my stories because you'll call me on it. So that's good, that's good. It's great that our dollar's actually worth something now, eh? The bargains are even better, eh? Here in Florida. I guess the first thing I got to tell you is I was at Disney yesterday, so I'm still kind of recovering from Space Mountain. So my brain and fine motor skills are just coming back online this morning. So if I mess up a little with the presentation, that will be my excuse. So I guess I can move forward. Hopefully the wireless device. Press the button. There we go. Just waiting for it to come up. And they always ask you to come up with a really innovative title. So the way that Canada Post transformed a lot of our business processes using GuiXT. Now, you're going to be handed out these blue cards, so you get the bonus session here. And what that means is that you will get one of these very neat t-shirts to say, "I survived Ross's lame presentation." So I believe what you need to do, you'll be handed these cards, and you have to go visit the Synactive booth. See, there's always a catch, eh? That's in business. You got to go visit the Synactive booth. You hand them the card that says that you attended this presentation, and you'll get one of those beautiful form-fitting t-shirts. So, Canada Post. Well, this is, I guess, where I can't stretch it a little bit because there's too many Canadians in the room. But we're a big business. We're a $7 billion business. We have 72,000 employees. Over 13 million points of call. We service 1 million businesses in Canada. We have 24 major processing plants, 24,000 points of access to the mail, 6,000 vehicles, and as you can see, we were recently awarded a great distinction of being one of the top 100 employers in Canada. So again, something that we're very proud of, and those are some of our Canada Post group of companies. So you see that we have Innova Post and Purolator, who are some of our sister companies. Another thing we're very proud of as a postal organization is that we're a profitable postal organization, and that's not always easy to do when you're servicing the second largest geographic country in the world, and you have only about 30 odd million we're up to. I'll have to check next week to see the birth announcements, but we're probably a little over 30. And so about Canada Post and sort of how we started our journey. In the year 2000, we started a project called Business Transformation. And this is what we started with. This was this spaghetti map diagram that showed all of our systems didn't talk to each other. There was a lot of duplicate data entry, interfaces. So a lot of complexity in terms of our landscape. Hence, I guess the customer call from SAP, and we got into SAP in a big way. And as you can see by this next slide, in terms of overall footprint, Canada Post is right up there worldwide in terms of having one of the largest footprints of SAP in the world. In terms of both size and complexity, needless to say, we not only get those nice Christmas cards, we also get the calendars every year. So it's a great perk. From an HR perspective, tell me what we don't have. We basically use all of their functionality, and we wrap it with workflow And the only thing that I can think of that we don't currently use is their e-recruitment solution right now. We haven't, I guess, started a project on that quite yet, but everything from A to Z is SAP. So I'm here to talk to you about GuiXT and sort of what, how Canada Post uses GuiXT. One of the things, one of the main complaints, we're on 4.6C, the version that we're on right now, and we're starting actually an upgrade in December to ERP 6.0, if that's what they're still calling it. They tend to change the name every couple of weeks just to keep you on your toes. So basically, we're in the midst of upgrading, but 4.6C, we've been there since 2002. So one of the obviously complaints about SAP screens is that, well, let's face it, they were ugly. And we had a lot of end users saying the same thing. And, a lot of time in frustration in terms of some of their user experience with SAP. Not only did we go through a massive transformation of eliminating a whole bunch of legacy systems that they were quite used to, which is kind of funny because they hate them at the time that they're there, but once you take them away and introduce something new, it was like the good old days type of mentality. But we moved to SAP, and so we had some challenges certainly on the user side. We used to joke with our executive that we were certain that GuiXT and SAP were in cahoots because the business plan was they build them ugly and then Synactive swoops in and sells you a product. So, but I'm told that's not the case, so we'll take them on their word, okay? So what is the advantages of GuiXT? Well, you create user-friendly screens in a nutshell. You can combine screens, you can delete unused screens. Many fields, if you take a look at an info type in HR, you look at all the fields and you're potentially only using 2 or 3. But that, from an end user perspective, just confuses the heck out of them. You can add text right to the screen, press here, as you'll see that we've done that in ours. Display images if you want, we haven't got that fancy quite yet. I like the push buttons and the radio buttons functionality. You can set default values, very powerful, so that if it's always the same, or under certain circumstances it's always the same, the end user doesn't have to do it at all. GuiXT will do it, the end user doesn't even know. You take the field right off the screen, and we did that in the appraisal that I'm going to show you, where there was a step that they'd have to follow, and 50% of them wouldn't remember to do it, so we just said, forget it. We'll just take it right off the screen, and GuiXT will do it for us. And you can change the length of fields. You can do what you want. So we know when this was first introduced to us way back when, 2004, it was a very compelling argument when at a time when we had a lot of pain points in terms of gaining overall user acceptance of SAP and SAP HR. So some of the benefits that that were sold to us and we've seen, because if I'm saying it here today, I can guarantee you we've seen the benefit, is reduced training time and cost. You're going to see a slide a little bit later. Data entry efficiency, by removing fields, by condensing screens. Be amazed of how quickly a transaction can be completed. And you get the user not to focus on the transaction itself in SAP, but the actual business process. Because sometimes they're so nose deep into trying to figure out how to do the transaction, they forget what the heck they're doing in terms of the overall business process. With that comes increased productivity. Custom application, going, for instance, the ABAP route or doing the custom screen apps can be expensive, not only to complete, but expensive to maintain. So GuiXT doesn't require any custom code, and so it's really just it's a layer that sits on top basically, and very easy to work with. And that's what our technical company in NovaPost, that's why I asked if there's anyone from NovaPost in the house. That's what, that's been their experience as well. We have a very small cell because I manage the service contract, and I'm always beating them down to say charge me less money next year because there's not a lot that they have to do. And logical screen layout. it's what you want it to be, not what SAP certainly dictates or delivers to you just out of the box. Familiar CPC terminology, that's Canada Post, so being familiar. SAP uses so many bizarre terms on their screens. And, the folks, we're talking about folks in postal facilities, supervisors, managing employees, trying to figure out what the heck, what that means on the screen. And I'm going to use the example of objects on loan a little bit later, which, just blew people away in terms of what that meant. And then you get the odd German slip, right, where you go to a screen and it's in German. And that always tends to freak them out a little bit. But so you can use whatever terminology is within your business. So if it's postal walks, you can use postal walks. If it's, whatever you call it, you can make it so. User error, reduce support calls. Absolutely. I'll talk to you a little bit. I have a slide a little bit later, but when we used to go through our annual performance appraisal exercise, we pretty much had to dedicate a couple of technical folks just to answer questions. Our help desk would get inundated with multiple calls, people not understanding what they have to do and how frustrating, it was just an overall frustrating experience. User errors, this is a big one. When you're using radio buttons, it's hard to make an error. Well, we've seen it, but it's harder to make an error. But typically speaking, what you can also do, like I mentioned before, is that under certain circumstances, you can just have defaults. So if they put something in field 1 or 2, well, field 3 is automatically this. They don't have to select it. So that they don't forget to select it, or they don't select the wrong, the wrong entry from a pull-down area. No underlying changes to SAP. That's true. What you basically, there's no ABAP. You don't get clobbered when you do support packs. And we're just going through an upgrade right now. So that's, I guess, my next challenge. We're going to start in December. And it's pretty mobile in terms of moving to a new version. It's not perfect. You have to make some changes because SAP changes their screens. So there's a little bit, but overall, it's I'm told that there won't be a lot of work to get the screens up and running. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples, GuiXT for appraisals and the supervisor dashboard. We have other examples at Canada Post. We've used this in order to cash. We've also used it in other areas of HR, such as OM. We have a wide variety. We used it a little bit for training as well, but I wanted to focus on these two. The GuiXT for appraisals is near and dear to my heart because that was sort of the project that brought GuiXT into Canada Post, and a great story around that. Obviously, every time you do a project, you need to get funds. So you have to eventually go before an executive board, and everybody calls it whatever hell you want to call it, but you have to stand up there and talk. And I was attending the meeting for the appraisal one, and the meeting where the funds were allocated basically, and it's a whole lineup of vice presidents, and I think our CFO at the time was one of them, and they were just basically bashing everyone that came up in front of them and putting them through a really hard time. And then all of a sudden, we came up with the GuiXT for appraisals, and his exact comment was, "I don't care what it costs, just do it." Because it was such an ugly set of transactions that he personally was frustrated with, because at Canada Post, the team leaders are responsible for basically completing the appraisal process using SAP, putting in the ratings, uploading we have a Word document template, and that becomes the official record. So in the past, we used to flip this all stuff to HR, who would get, once a year, they would get swamped with all of these forms. Half the time, they were chasing people probably for the next 6 months who didn't complete it. The only thing they had going for them is that sometimes they would get a rating, but they wouldn't receive the underlying documentation. And the reason they get a rating because it drove the bonus payment. So you'd get a number, but under all the underlying work, there was no guarantee that it was ever done. So moving to SAP, it put the onus on them not only to put in the rating, but to also attach the template right within SAP. And that, again, eliminated a lot of work within HR and made for a more seamless process, right? Fewer handoffs. And then I'll talk to you a little bit about our supervisor dashboard, or what I call our cheap and cheerful MSS. So SAP HR Appraisal in R3, ugly as sin. And in fairness to SAP, I don't think they ever thought that any customer would ever roll this out to team leaders. I think they thought that this would become centralized within HR, and basically, I guess all the documentation would flow to HR, and they would go through this hell and put them in. And I guess, to a certain extent, I guess if you only have a few people doing it, eventually they'll get good at it, right? But we decided that we wanted to drive efficiencies and we wanted to drive some process change. So, like I said, we pushed that role out to the basically what we call our team leaders, supervisors, whatever you call them. And so this is just a little snippet of the screens. So the quick reference guide for that was a meager 19 pages. So to complete the transaction, that has nothing to do with actually, all the soft stuff around appraisals, the hand-holding, the coaching, it'll be better next year pat on the back, the way to go components. This was just actually to figure out how to put the darn thing in the system and to make sure that your employee got a bonus. Because let's face it, that's what they cared about, right? So services for object, well, what that meant in SAP on one of the screens I think it's actually part of more than one screen, but on the top left-hand corner was this services for object type of icon. That was where you attach the appraisal. So can you imagine they called it services for object? So scratch your head and wonder what they were thinking when they did that, So it was very difficult. Search functionality was the standard. So to find your employee was brutal, especially 70,000 employees. You put in a name like Smith, or in terms of in Quebec, Savard, or anything, and you get this massive list, and not only current employees but withdrawn employees. So you'd have to scroll down and find your employees. It wasn't clear. It wasn't clear when you're actually on a new record. Again, because of the different status changes, sometimes you thought you were actually working in a screen that you weren't really working in. And we had so many instances where people would attach the actual appraisal before they even started the transaction because that services for object button was always present. So we had a brutal time on that in terms of just trying to make people cognizant of where they were in the process. Too many tabs, approvals. Again, it was very ugly, and the field names didn't make sense. How many of you have seen that in terms of different SAP screens? So that's where we changed the verbiage to to be more realistic to our end users. So we eliminated the tabs. We tried to keep everything on one page so that the user didn't have to scroll to different pages or to different tabs. The objective and appraisal forms and SAP screens were too complicated. That's, again, a little bit of duplication there. And confusing labels we talked about as well. So what does it look like? Well, it's coming through in yellow, but it's not yellow. Is it coming through yellow? No, good, okay. Well, this is what we did to start the process. I'm just going to show you a couple of slides. The first thing was to find your actual employee. So instead of you could see on the left-hand side of the screen is the native SAP. So what we do is, in terms of step one, is find my employee. So you put in the name, and you're presented with the list of employees. You can see the proper spelling of my name there. Just for the ASUG folks, just a little shot there, please. And So all you do is you find your employee and you double click. And once you do that, this is where you are. So this is sort of the launch pad for us in terms of exactly what you're about to go through. So this is you sort of, from a professional development perspective, you can see this is a cycle. You start with your objectives, and you see we have different unions. So you radio tab, there was another, oh my gosh, they would actually have to go through a list. They'd have to search for the proper appraisal model, and it was like how many pages. And then they would find the actual appraisal model that they were looking for. So here's a perfect example of radio buttons where they don't screw up. Because many times they completed all the work only to attach it to the wrong appraisal model, and then they'd have to start all over again. And then you can create your objectives, you can revise your objectives, you do your mid-year, and then you do your year-end. That was that part of this project. The other part was actually just a placeholder, because that's all the money I had. So it was a placeholder, and you see probationary reports, but we did get money for that, so we have done the probationary reports as well. Competency, we haven't got to competency. I'd love to tell you that we did, because that's another ugly reality. But we did get to probation, so the left hand of the screen. So basically, it was a good news story for users, because mainly they worked on the left-hand side, and God knows if you got them to do that, you were winning. Getting them to update competencies and all that was probably a little bit more of a struggle, regardless of which format you used, but the main meat and potatoes was the left-hand side. So this is how to create your appraisal, or your objective, so we'll start. So we took a step 1, step 2 approach. If they screw this up, we're in big trouble, because I can't make this any easier than this, in terms of once they click the attach button, they're brought to a screen where they simply attach, it's on their hard drive, or a shared drive. They can see their drives, they choose the employee's objective, and they just click attach. Save, I think step 2, save, is just a feel-good step. I don't think it does anything, but they get positive confirmation that you've completed the process. And there's a little click where if they want to understand in terms of how to do their objectives, tips to the SMART model, or whatever, bring them to a template, the actual template itself. By clicking on that button, that takes them to a different part of our intranet, where they can go get the actual template itself. So step 1, step 2. And you're going to see this repeated, because, again, this is a process they only do, right, once a year. So they forget. And then you get, with turnover and all that, it was problematic. So this, I believe, is this the mid-year? So exactly, we left it exactly the same. So they'll simply go in, choose their mid-year template, or they can work with the existing objective, which has a section for mid-year comments. They can go in, they make their comments, click save. Again, it's a fake save. In reality, I don't think it does anything, but it makes them feel good. It says you've completed the transaction. Great. And again, they can click for tips and be taken to another document, which is kind of like a user guide type of thing, but not on using the technology about conducting mid-years and that sort of thing. And then the grand finale, year-end. So basically, we start this process in January, and we have to have it into the system by about the middle of February so that we can process the bonus checks for March. So this was the big win right here, because this is where a lot of errors were made. So basically, again, the step 1, then they select the rating of the employee. And great news is we had a situation, I thought I'd made it as easy as I could, but they would tend to go from step 1 to step 3, and they'd forget step 2. So even when you think you've made it as easy as you can, we had a certain percentage of employees. So we corrected that problem by not letting them go any further. So if they bypass step 2, then they're brought back to say, tell us what the rating is, right? And then step 3 is a save. And then step 4 is finalized. And the reason it's print. They get that little confirmation. So they can print out for their employee that it's been completed, and the employee gets a single page stating what the rating was. So that's kind of their receipt. The other, obviously, you're working with a template too, so you have your template that you worked all along. Obviously it's a living, breathing document that you started back in January of the year before. So obviously you can mark as well on that document as well what the rating is. But this is your system confirmation of what your rating is. So you should have a match, right, between what's on the document versus what's in the system. Finalize button is very important, because once you finalize, it's locked, right? You can't go back and change the rating. You need your technical people to do it. So they get this little pop-up screen that says you're about to finalize your appraisal. Are you sure? And as soon as they click yes, it's baked, and there's no turning back. So that was important too, because first year we didn't have that. Guess what? So, sort of what are the benefits? Well, you can see with training, we reduced it by 88%. That's true. Wouldn't be up there if it wasn't. I guarantee that. Data, 68 fewer keystrokes. Actually had somebody count it. And 70% reduction in processing time. It's pretty simple, eh? The step 1, step 2, step 3. Support calls are pretty much non-existent right now. And user errors, look at that, 95%. We used to have one employee at NovaPost, and pretty much from January on to March, that's what she did for a living. Fix errors, unlock appraisals, start over again. A lot of frustration. So that's sort of the story of our appraisals. Now for supervisors, again, we pushed out a lot of transactions to our team leads and our supervisors. Basically, I'll give you a perfect example. In the past, you used to fill out a leave form, and you'd have to go to your supervisor. Your supervisor would do their part. Then they would forward on to a group within payroll. Payroll folks would then enter it into another system, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of manual work. So right now, we just have supervisors do it directly in CAT2. And it updates the system right away. Because one of the biggest problems that we had was, once you do it in another system, obviously you don't have access to the information unless you build interfaces. So right now, once that is entered into the system, an employee can go on ESS and see how much remaining leave they have. So a big advantage. So we wanted to develop by supervisors for supervisors. You're going to see that we actually brought in supervisors and tried to understand their pain points. And you're going to see a little bit later on in my, I think the top learning things, is that make sure that you just don't, you'll always want to bring in your good users onto the team. Those are your wrong audience. Bring in the ones that drive you nuts. Bring in the ones that are making all the mistakes. Don't bring in your good ones, because they won't fully articulate the pain of others, because they get it. Bring in people that don't get it. Design it for them. So what we wanted obviously less training. We wanted them to focus more on the process, not on the transaction. They were so hung up in trying to get it to work without bringing down payroll. They always thought whatever they do, they bring down payroll, so they're so nervous. So you just want them to focus on the transaction. We look for high value. You can't do everything. There was a lot of transactions. You want to find the high value transactions, the one they do on a continuous basis, because you don't want your GuiXT process or screens to be as onerous or as complex if you try to take on everything, because you don't want a dashboard that's this long, right? And just the user use Canada Post verbiage, right? So we brought in our challenged users, and then we signed up another group of challenged users to do UAT testing, and I'll let you read some of their comments. So this is sort of how you know you got it right. If you're seeing comments like this, then you know you got it right. Very, very important. So this is sort of what it looks like. So we bring them sort of to their dashboard. We call this sort of our cheap and cheerful MSS, Manager Self-Service. And it's role-based, right? So perform supervisor duties. The other thing is if they just want to go to the standard SAP menu, they click the other little button there, and they're brought to native SAP. We didn't want to force people. We wanted them, if you're comfortable using SAP, we didn't want to force you into a GuiXT world. Now, we sort of changed our philosophy on that a little bit. We would kind of like to force people, because they're still making some of the same errors they did in the past. But we're rolling it out to a very large group of folks, a very diverse group of folks from Atlantic Canada to the Pacific. And we didn't want, at this point, right off the bat, we didn't want to force them into the GuiXT world. So you can see that once they hit that perform supervisor's duties, there's 3 groupings of transactions. There's their time management responsibilities, their safety responsibilities, and God knows they need to run reports. There was another great thing, big wars, because I wouldn't let them put any more than, I tried to keep it to half dozen reports, because in theory, in their profile, they must have had 20 reports. Who has time to look at 20 reports? So we tried to focus the business now to say, tell me what you really want them to focus on, right? Because at first you have all this capability and you want to give them everything. Well, guess what? They do nothing because they're so overwhelmed. So we tried to focus on what you really wanted them to focus on. So when they go to their time management, the first thing that they can do is it's activity 1, activity 2, activity 3, and finally activity 4. So this is how we want them to spend their day. This is the sequence. We want them to fix any error logs. We don't want pay defects. So if they didn't do their, if there's a problem with overtime that they've put in or anything to that degree, we want to try to keep the employee's pay clean. So that they run a little log. It tells them if there's any pay defects or any warning or errors on the time side that would eventually go to payroll. The other thing is I mentioned to you in terms of Cat 2. It takes them to a bit of a modified Cat 2 screen so that they don't have to search in the menu to find it. And the other one is attendance management. And householders is activity 4. Canada Post is part of our collective agreement. The things that you call junk mail, we call revenue. They have to deliver different flyers and addressed ad mail, and they get paid by piece. So this is how the supervisor manages how much they get paid. Again, attendance management. I'm going to show you a screen on attendance management. The next screen is we built this customized, call it customized GuiXT calendar. The value of this calendar is the fact that the supervisor can see RDO means rotational day off. So not all of us, certainly in the postal world, vast majority of our employees work different shifts, different days. For myself, it's always Saturday, Sunday is my RDO, but not for others. So how do you manage pattern absenteeism? So this allows you to see what the RDO is and to see if there's any pattern absenteeism issues. It also allows you to obviously see what type of leave they are taking. And up there we can give, for instance, supervisor notes, takes us to the notes section. So they can make notes on the employee in terms of, this is the third absence after an RDO or before an RDO. Attendance profile, leave entitlement and balances, so they can go directly if they want to drill down. And for each employee, you can see that we built on the right-hand side what their current entitlements are. So if you're going to run into an issue with people running out of leave, I don't know if you have that issue, but sometimes people will be off and they don't have the leave entitlements to cover it. Now you're in a situation of uncomfortably trying to recover that. So this makes you a little bit more proactive, so the supervisor can see what employees they may have some issues with. 24-hour notice is a button that they press. It takes them to a form. It's part of our collective agreement, and basically it's a form that gets filled in saying that we're going to talk about attendance. So it allows them to do that. Safety. Canada, I guess we have, as you know, different provinces and territories. They all have different workers' compensation boards. And there's a bunch of forms, and we want to find statistics on where we're having issues, either with dog bites or slips and falls or various components. So we enter it into, legislatively we have to do it. we have to produce certain documentation, and then obviously statistically we want to understand. It's a major issue actually for Canada Post in terms of the number of accidents that we have. So accidents are extremely expensive to a company in terms of overall cost, and you have to obviously replace employees as well when they're away. There's additional costs. You got to pay them, then you got to pay to replace them, then you got to pay administratively to deal with all the boards, and then in certain cases you have to pay for medical devices. So the safety was an area that the supervisors absolutely hated. It was basically the native SAP version was 17 screens. They'd have to go through 17 screens to complete the transaction. It was awful. We were able, using GuiXT, to get it down to about 5. And what the next slide shows, that if they didn't put in the required information, which was often the case, because don't forget this information is flowing to the boards, the various boards in the various provinces. If the information wasn't complete, guess what? It would get returned, and you'd have to do it all over again. And there's certain legislative time limits that we have to get it to the boards as well, right? So this is an example where you make sure that your data is correct by building in different tools that GuiXT offers to make sure that your data is good. Reports. Again, I talked a little bit about reports. We wanted to, instead of having to go through scrolling through the menu bar, trying to find the various reports that they want. A lot of them are custom reports, so they're Z objects. Hopefully anyone knows what that means. So sometimes it's very difficult to find. And so we just basically took the reports that really management wanted them to focus on, and we built them into this kind of dashboard, and that would take them to launch their reports. It's not that they didn't have access to the other reports. If there were other ones that they really liked, they're right there on the right-hand side. They just have to go find them. So leaving that option was one of the ways that we dealt with that. So quantifiable results. Well, we're all about ROI and proving that the money that we spent was well spent. So at Canada Post, I don't know, we have the concept if you have black belts. Sounds onerous, but it's people that are trained in the area of just measuring and in terms of efficiencies and quality improvements. And so I guess they asked the question before we went into this supervisor dashboard, what's in terms of ease of use and to that degree, how is it with standard SAP versus the GuiXT? So you can see in terms of in the areas of the calendar, the attendance management, accident reporting, and reports, you can see there's some dramatic increases. So this was based on actual samples across a wide spectrum of our supervisors. So this project actually was deemed a big success, and a lot of good supervisor comments, because now the supervisor was, doing their job actually on the floor, as opposed to trying to figure out SAP and a lot of the support documentation. So key learning points from Canada Post. Include actual end users. What a novel concept. Basically, this is a lot of rapid application development. You get into, you try to do your best to, use a methodology, and certainly I'm from IT, so we demand a methodology. We want to make sure that user requirements are nailed down, and you try to go to a technical document. But truth be told, you sort of get your business requirements as to what you'd like to achieve. And then to a large extent, you adjust as you go along. Because what's going to happen is you're going to get into a room and with someone who understands how to use the product, and they're going to make the changes right in front of your eyes. It's that fast. I was telling the story earlier that when we first did our appraisal one, the guys in California from Synactive, because at the time we had no expertise at Canada Post. So what a great situation to be in, eh? Totally dependent on the vendor. So we actually, in my office, simply just did a hookup in terms of a WebEx, got on the speakerphone and told them what we wanted. So they presented, we sent them a core group of requirements. They produced this, we said, no, that button's too big, we want this button over here, we want this verbiage. Right on the screen in front of our eyes, they'd make the changes and we publish it. And it sat on my laptop. And that's what I actually went around with and sold the executive on. because I said, you know what, you're used to the pain here. Well, this is what it could look like, and it was a model that would actually take you there. So very powerful way to to prove your case. Focus on your most challenged users. Typically speaking, people took it as an insult if I called them on a project. Typically because so some folks near and dear to me, I would say, oh, Janie, could you mind actually coming and testing this for us? Just simply because if she can do it, we're okay. Okay? You'll tend to want people to say, oh, we got to get Jim. Jim's our best guy. You don't want Jim. You definitely don't want Jim. Use screens as a learning tool. You have an opportunity here to focus a little bit on process. So use the screens as a learning tool. And in that way, there really should be no support, hopefully very minimal in terms of technical support documentation. Don't GuiXT everything. I didn't show this to the Synactive folks. Once you have a little, be selective, seriously. Because once you have some success, everybody wants everything GuiXT'd. And you know what? Don't do that. First of all, everything doesn't need to be GuiXT. Focus on the transactions that you can get true efficiencies out of, where people don't use them that often. If you have a group of 4 or 5 people in a room jamming away at some transactions, they don't need GuiXT, because they're going to get really good at it. And maybe you can drive some efficiencies, potentially, but don't GuiXT everything in. Don't go overboard. Like, don't try and condense 18 screens into one. Because what's going to happen is that GuiXT is performing, basically, it's actually doing everything those 18 screens do in the background for you. So the user, you can argue all you want with the end user that it doesn't take any longer, but when they're there, waiting for the screen to come back, because GuiXT is in the background doing all of these things for them automatically, it's hard to convince them. So don't go too nuts on that. Just make it so that their end user experience will seem as fast as it was in the past. They'll just whip through the transactions a lot quicker because they're looking at less things and GuiXT is filling in some stuff for them. So there's a limit. Just know there's a limit, okay? And balance. That was my 4th bullet. 5th bullet. So just balance in terms of screen consolidation versus perceived performance issues, because that was one of our learning curves on one of the projects where we actually found that the end user experience wasn't all that great in the sense that they felt it was slower. Luckily, there is a way, Synactive found a way for us to fix that, but it was a learning curve for us. So we've gone on to do many other GuiXT projects that had some great success. So these are our learning points for you. And I think I'm at the end of my time, and it's 10:02, and I think you also have lunch. But I'm definitely willing to entertain any questions that you may have. Yes?
I have a question about the assessments. If you have a template, like it's a paper assessment, and you attach that, so when it's attached, you need to print it off, or someone needs to view it.
Yes, absolutely. The supervisor can always go in, view the attachments, make changes, and reattach it. And through ESS, the employee can go in and see what their performance ratings were year over year. But they do get a hard copy as well of their objectives and ultimately their rating and their performance for the year.
When let's say that your employee wants to transfer to another post office.
Yeah.
Okay, so then that receiving measure.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Because it's all integrated within SAP. So if you change org unit, as an example, and you get a new employee, the supervisor gets all of the previous appraisals.
I understand your challenge because this year we put our assessments online, and they had to go through and fill out all of the blanks.
Right.
And then they had to send it over to get a report and print them all out.
Yeah.
So,
you're welcome. Yes. Yes.
And you have a place where the manager will go behind the supervisor.
Yeah. Well, that's the actual notes functionality built within SAP, built within CATS. So is it report? Yeah, they can view that. I believe there's another screen where they can view all of their notes.
Could they report it? Could they get it out of the system?
I believe they can print them, yes. Yeah. Again, that's native SAP. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
What percentage of this people can e-master upgrade? Or do you think we can revert to anything?
Great question. Right now, the upgrade, SAP recommends that you do a technical upgrade first. So basically what you're seeing here will all come over, and we'll use it in the R3, obviously the SAP GUI environment. In the future, we've made a good investment in this, and we have good success. So are we in a rush to do other things? Probably not. But if we move to more of a portal strategy, then we'll be looking at their other product, which is GuiXT Fusion. So we'll be looking at that product, weighing that against Adobe Forms and others, because I think the two probably will coexist. So I don't think you're going to go flip one or the other. It's going to be a combination of the two. So they gave me a demo earlier this morning of Fusion. It looks very good, and I'm told that the work that we've done here on the SAP GUI side is easily transportable into Fusion. So being me, I said, great, you'll do it for me first, and then I'll make that judgment. So that's what they're going to do. So that's a takeaway, I believe, for the Synactive folks. Yes? Have I used it on the... No, we haven't, and that's the next great, I think, proving ground for us, and that's what the Fusion product is. Yeah, I'll let on the technical side, I'll let Carlos deal with that.
My name's Carlos Noriega with Synactive. Can everyone hear me? Okay. So the mic's not working. The question is, can you use GuiXT in the portals environment? Yes, you can. So if you're running current R3 versions, if you're on 4.6, 4.7, you can actually create your own standalone portal URL, okay? Using GuiXT Fusion, you can customize those transactions, okay? When you're on the SAP NetWeaver versions, either ECC 5.0 or ECC 6.0, you would make those changes first in SAP GUI, and then transport that into your iViews. Okay? And that's what the GuiXT Fusion product can do for you in the portals. No, the methodology is the same. You're still using the same GuiXT scripting technology and the commands, but since the portals is a Java or web GUI interface, it's no longer a SAP GUI. We had to make or create the sort of technology to work in the web GUI. So really, you're using the same scripts. It's this now, how am I delivering it? It's through a web GUI. Okay. And that component, Fusion, is built on the Ajax programming language. Okay.
The benefit there is actually that they're showing me earlier is you can create an iView almost per role, and then just have it applied via security. So if a team lead dashboard, in the future, what we may see is just a little tab on the portal saying, supervisor, my duties. Click on that, and then you could build out that, that whole set of those three main groupings of activities. You could build it off of that as well. Because right now, it's kind of, what we go through, it's kind of frustrating to a certain extent because they have to perform some of their duties on the portal, and then some of their duties in R3, two separate logins. Kind of a drag. Any other questions? Yes?
I mean, what's the percentage of business of launchpad or
It's a third-party product. It's actually interesting third-party product because GuiXT is actually embedded in SAP. So when you buy SAP, you're getting GuiXT. But it's not like you get it there and say, well, whoopee, I can just turn it on. No, you got to call these folks, and then, but it's already there, so that helps. So it's well integrated. And Canada Post is a pretty strict policy. We only deal with certified vendors. We just don't want the hassle. Yeah.
Is it limited to the modules that you mentioned here?
No, you can use it. Actually, there's examples that we have on the SD side, the order to cash side. We have examples. Just trying to think of what other examples we have at Canada Post. Let me take a look. We've done it, obviously, the PA, the time, the OM, the training, VA01, VA02, VA03, employee health and safety. We've done it. So that's what we've done so far. Any other questions?
In fact, GuiXT works across the board of any module or transaction in the ERP system.
So I know that lunch is awaiting you, so don't forget to present this at the booth, that I survived Ross's lame presentation, and you get a really nice t-shirt. If there's no other questions, I just certainly don't want to hold you up on your lunch. Thank you very much.